Rewire your nervous system for unbreakable consistency. She stared at the journal on her nightstand, blank pages taunting her, just like yesterday, and the month before that. Another promise broken before sunrise. Most of us believe consistency is about willpower. That if we just tried harder, cared more, or wanted it badly enough, we'd finally stick to the things we say matter. But what if the problem wasn't motivation at all? What if your nervous system had been wired, from childhood forward, to resist the very patterns you're trying to build? She didn't know it yet, but her brain had been running the same protective program for years, one designed to keep her safe, not successful. And until she understood how to rewrite it, every goal would feel like pushing water uphill. The science behind this is both humbling and liberating. Researchers at Stanford discovered that consistency isn't a personality trait, it's a nervous system state. When your body feels chronically unsafe, even small commitments trigger a stress response. Your brain interprets routine as restriction, discipline as danger. She thought she was lazy. In reality, she was dysregulated. It started with small things: forgetting to drink water, skipping breakfast, staying up scrolling because sleep felt like surrender. Nothing dramatic, just a slow drift away from herself, one-way decision at a time. Then came the breaking point. Not a crash, but a quiet realization. She couldn't remember the last time she'd kept a promise to herself. Part of her still doubted it could change. Maybe this was just who she was, someone who started strong and faded fast. But something about that thought made her pause. What if she wasn't broken? What if she was just running outdated software? The nervous system operates on patterns, not preferences. When you grow up in chaos, your body learns to stay hypervigilant. When you're punished for mistakes, your brain learns to avoid trying. When rest is earned, not given, your system never fully relaxes. Consistency becomes impossible because your body is busy surviving. She began to notice the signs: heart racing before simple tasks, procrastination that felt like paralysis, the way her mind went blank whenever she tried to plan ahead. These weren't character flaws, they were nervous system signals. Her body was saying, "I don't feel safe enough to build." So she stopped fighting herself and started listening. Not to motivational videos or productivity hacks, but to the quiet language of her own physiology. What made her shoulders drop? When did her breath deepen? What time of day did her mind feel clear instead of cluttered? She learned that her nervous system had two modes: protection and connection. In protection, everything feels like effort. In connection, effort feels like flow. The goal wasn't to force consistency, it was to create the conditions where her body felt safe enough to sustain it. Researchers call this window of tolerance, the zone where you can handle stress without shutting down or spinning out. Most people trying to build consistency are operating outside that window, forcing habits their nervous system isn't ready to hold. She realized she'd been asking her body to sprint while it was still learning to stand. The first shift was simple. She stopped setting goals and started tracking safety cues. Not what she accomplished, but how she felt while doing it. Did her morning routine leave her energized or drained? Did exercise feel nourishing or punishing? Did planning ahead create clarity or anxiety? She started small. So small, it felt ridiculous. 1 glass of water before coffee. 5 minutes of movement. No rules. Writing 3 words in her journal instead of 3 pages. Part of her resisted. This felt too easy, too gentle. Where was the discipline, the sacrifice, the proof she was serious? But something unexpected happened. The smaller the step, the less her nervous system resisted. And the less it resisted, the more consistent she became. Neuroscientists explain this through the concept of neuroplasticity under safety. Your brain only rewires when it feels secure enough to learn. Push too hard, and you activate old survival patterns. Move gently, and new pathways form naturally. She wasn't building discipline. She was building trust with herself. There was still one thing she couldn't explain. Some days, even the smallest task felt impossible. Her body would freeze, her mind would scatter, and no amount of self-talk could pull her through. She learned these were nervous system storms, moments when old trauma patterns got reactivated. Maybe a tone of voice reminded her of past criticism. Maybe a deadline triggered childhood fear of failure. Her body was responding to a memory, not the present moment. So she practiced something radical. She stopped pushing through. Instead, she paused, placed a hand on her chest, breathed slowly until her heart rate settled. Reminded her nervous system, "You're safe now. This moment is not that moment." It felt absurd at first, like she was babying herself, wasting time. But the more she did it, the shorter the storms became. And the shorter they became, the more consistent her actions felt. Research from the Polyvagal Institute confirms this. Self-regulation precedes self-discipline. You can't build sustainable habits on a dysregulated nervous system. It's like trying to construct a house on quicksand. She started to see consistency differently. Not as a rigid schedule, but as a rhythm. Not as a test of worthiness, but as a conversation with her body. Some days, her system had capacity for more. Other days, it needed gentleness. Both were valid. Both were progress. She laughed, realizing progress didn't always look like progress. What surprised her most wasn't just how much smoother everything felt once she stopped forcing it, but how her relationship with herself began to shift. She wasn't at war anymore. She was in partnership. This wasn't a promotion or a quick fix, just a real shift that changed how she moved through her days. I tested the same principles, and honestly, it took longer than I expected to see the pattern. But once it clicked, everything felt different. What worked for me was combining nervous system awareness with something tangible. I started using a simple habit tracker that didn't focus on streaks, but on understanding my own rhythms. It wasn't about perfection. It was about data that helped me see when I was regulated and when I wasn't. I'll leave a link below if that sounds like something worth exploring. No pressure, just sharing what actually made the difference. She kept going, not because it was easy, but because it was finally sustainable. Her nervous system learned that consistency didn't mean rigidity. It meant safety, predictability without pressure, structure without shame. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, her life began to reflect that shift. She woke up without dread, moved through her day without constant negotiation, kept promises to herself not because she forced them, but because her body believed they were safe to keep. One morning, months later, she opened her journal and realized every page was full, not perfectly written, not eloquent or impressive, just honest, continuous, real. She hadn't become a different person, she'd become regulated enough to act like herself. Neuroscience shows us something profound. The brain doesn't distinguish between physical and emotional safety. If you grew up feeling criticized, your nervous system may still brace for judgment every time you try something new. If you were praised only for performance, rest may still feel like failure. Consistency breaks when your body perceives the habit as a threat. She used to think she needed more discipline. Now she understood. She needed more safety. And safety isn't something you think your way into. It's something you practice, one micro moment at a time. There were still hard days. Days when old patterns resurfaced, when doubt crept back in, when her body reverted to protection mode. But now she recognized them for what they were, not failures, but information. Her nervous system was signaling something. And instead of overriding it, she listened. Sometimes that meant resting. Sometimes it meant adjusting her approach. Sometimes it meant asking for support instead of grinding alone. She realized that unbreakable consistency wasn't about never breaking, it was about knowing how to come back. Researchers at Yale found that people who maintain long-term behavior change share one trait: self-compassion during setbacks. They don't spiral into shame when they miss a day. They don't abandon the entire system because of one disruption. They recalibrate and continue. She started treating herself the way she'd treat a close friend, with patience, with curiosity, with the assumption that she was doing her best with the capacity she had in that moment. And her nervous system responded, because it finally felt seen, not judged, supported, not forced. When she looked in the mirror again, it wasn't her reflection that had changed. It was what she believed about herself. She wasn't someone who couldn't stick to things. She was someone whose body had been protecting her all along. And now, for the first time, protection and progress were moving in the same direction. Consistency became her love language to herself, a way of saying, I see you, I trust you, I'm not going anywhere. Not because she was perfect, but because she was finally, deeply, nervous system level safe. Tell us what part of this story resonated most and where you're watching from. See you in the next video. Bye.